Chauvet Cave in southern France contains paintings that are roughly 36,000 years old. Lions, horses, rhinos, and bears, drawn with a level of skill and observation that still amazes people today. The artists understood anatomy, movement, and perspective. Some animals are shown in mid-stride, muscles tense, heads turning. These are not random sketches. They are the work of people who watched animals for thousands of hours and then recreated them from memory, deep underground, by firelight. And Chauvet is not the only example. There is Lascaux, Altamira, and Sulawesi in Indonesia, where cave art dates to at least 45,000 years ago, making it some of the oldest known figurative art in the world. But here is what makes this especially fascinating. These paintings were not made near the cave entrances, where people would naturally shelter. They were made deep inside, sometimes hundreds of meters in, through narrow passages and dark chambers that had to be crawled through to reach. Someone carried animal fat lamps into complete darkness and painted there. Think about that. People do not do that when the weather is perfect and hunting is good. They do that when they cannot go outside. When rain has been falling for 2 straight days, when every tool has already been sharpened, and when there is nothing left to do but go deeper into the dark and create something. Now, we cannot prove that cave art was specifically a rainy day activity. But the idea makes sense. The greatest creative explosion in human prehistory happened in the exact places where people were most likely to be stuck indoors for long periods of time. And that leads to an even bigger possibility. Rain did not just help create art. It may have helped create culture itself. Think about what happens when 15 to 30 people are forced into a confined space together for days with little to do. They talk. They listen. They share information. In 2014, anthropologist Polly Wiesner published a study comparing daytime conversations and nighttime fireside conversations among the Jew/Hoansi Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert. During the day, people mostly talked about practical matters, land, resources, disputes, daily concerns. But at night, around the fire, more than 80% of conversation shifted to stories, songs, rituals, and shared memories. Firelight changed the conversation. It softened faces, reduced tension, and created an atmosphere where people opened up. The campfire was not just a source of warmth. It was the original social network. And what people shared around it was not meaningless small talk. It was survival knowledge. Where water disappears in the dry season, which plants are safe to eat, where the best flint can be found, how to track specific animals. That is not gossip. That is critical information passing from one mind to another through language. And beyond the practical knowledge, there was something more. Stories, myths, explanations for why the rain comes and where it goes. Every ancient culture on Earth has rain mythology. Someone had to invent those stories, and they were probably invented while people sat together in exactly the situation the stories were trying to explain. Here is something even more remarkable. Some of the oldest known oral traditions ever verified against real geological events come from Aboriginal Australian stories describing sea level changes that happened around 7,000 years ago. Those stories survived for 7 millennia through nothing but human beings telling them to one another. That kind of cultural memory does not develop unless groups spend enormous amounts of time doing exactly that. Sitting together, repeating stories over and over again across generations. So rainy days were not wasted time. They were transmission time. They were the days when knowledge passed from old to young. When skills were demonstrated. When a group's shared memory was reinforced, corrected, and expanded. And here is the part most people never think about. Rain was not always bad. Sometimes it was the best thing that could happen. After heavy rain, the ground becomes soft. Soft ground creates perfect tracks. Deep, clear, and detailed. You can see exactly which animals passed by, how long ago, how fast they were moving, and where they went. Some of the best tracking conditions in the world come right after rain stops. Rain also meant water. Humans could collect and store rainwater, and even early hominins may have understood this. Rock depressions that fill with clean water during rainfall are found near many prehistoric campsites, and some may even have been deliberately deepened to hold more. But water was not the only benefit. Rain also changed the food supply. Mushrooms appear after rain. Certain plants suddenly flourish. Tubers become easier to dig from wet soil. Insects emerge in large numbers. A rainy period did not stop food gathering, transformed it, and the groups that understood those changes had a major advantage over the ones that did not. Take termites, for example. In tropical Africa, termites swarm after rain. They are one of the most protein-rich foods available. You do not need tools. You do not need weapons. You simply collect them. Chimpanzees today feast on termite swarms after rainstorms. Early humans almost certainly did the same, probably on a much larger scale. So what did ancient humans do when it rained all day? They did everything that mattered. They kept the fire alive. They made the tools they would use for the next hunt. They sewed the clothing that would keep them warm in winter. They twisted the rope that would hold their shelters together. They ground the pigment they would use to paint animals on cave walls deep underground. They told the stories that carried survival knowledge across generations. And when the rain finally stopped, they stepped outside into soft ground marked by perfect animal tracks, and they went back to work. Rain did not slow them down. It gave them time to prepare for what came next. Every tool, every piece of clothing, every story, every painting on a cave wall. All of it may have grown out of downtime, out of those long hours and days when people could not go out and had nothing to do but sit beside a fire and think. Boredom probably did not exist for them the way it exists for us. Because when you are sitting in a cave with rain hammering outside, and your survival depends on what you can make with your hands over the next few hours, you do not get bored. You get creative. And that may be one of the biggest reasons we are still here today. Even 5,000 years ago, losing fire was serious enough that people carried special equipment just to prevent it. So when rain came, the first priority was not shelter. It was the fire. You moved it deeper into the cave. You shielded it with hides or brush. You fed it carefully, not too much, not too little. You searched for dead lower branches from conifer trees, the ones protected by the canopy and still dry underneath. You split wet logs to reach the dry wood inside. You used birch bark as kindling because birch contains betulin, a chemical that can burn even when wet. During a storm, one person's entire job may have been to sit beside the fire for hours, feeding it, protecting it, and making sure it did not die. Because that fire was everything. It was warmth, light, safety, cooked food, and the center of the group's social life. Letting it go out was not just careless. It could be fatal for everyone. So the fire is alive and you are mostly dry. But you still cannot leave. What do? You make things. The archaeological record is very clear about this. Caves and rock shelters are filled with evidence of manufacturing. Stone tools appear in every stage of production. Piles of flaking debris, the tiny chips that fly off while shaping stone, are often found concentrated in specific spots inside caves, exactly where someone might sit near the firelight and work for hours. And it was not just stone tools. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found a 100,000-year-old ochre processing workshop. There were abalone shells used as mixing bowls, ochre ground into powder, and bone tools used to stir and apply it. This was not simple survival. This was deliberate production. Someone sat inside that cave, probably while rain pounded outside, and carefully made pigment using a clear process. Then there are bone needles. These appear in the archaeological record around 61,000 years ago in South Africa, and later across Europe and Asia. They are delicate, precise tools with tiny drilled eyes. You do not make a bone needle while running from danger. You make it while sitting still, focused, with time to spare. Rainy days gave people that time. And this is where things become even more interesting. At a Neanderthal site in France called Abri du Marais, archaeologists found a small fragment of twisted plant fiber cord dating to roughly 50,000 years ago. That is the oldest direct evidence of string ever discovered. Then, at Hohlfels Cave in Germany, they found a 35,000-year-old tool carved from mammoth ivory. It had 4 holes and spiral grooves, apparently designed specifically for twisting plant fibers into rope. Someone sat in that cave and carved a rope-making device. Making rope is slow, repetitive, and requires patience. It is the perfect task for bad weather. And rope changed everything. It allowed humans to tie objects together, build stronger shelters, create snares and traps, and attach tools to handles. A huge amount of human technology depends on string. And string was almost certainly invented by someone stuck indoors, waiting for the rain to stop. But it was not just tools and rope. People were also making their shelters more livable. At Sibutu Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found something most people would not expect from 77,000 years ago: bedding. Real bedding. Layers of sedges, rushes, and grasses had been carefully arranged into sleeping mats. The top layers even included leaves from Cape laurel, a plant known to repel insects naturally. Someone was not just surviving in that cave. They were making it comfortable. They were making it home. And the bedding was regularly burned and replaced to keep it clean. In other words, 77,000 years ago, people were already practicing pest control. But now the story takes a turn most people do not expect. Because everything so far, the tools, the rope, the bedding, is practical. What comes next is something else entirely. Art. Imagine you have not eaten in 2 days. You know exactly where the herd is. You tracked it yesterday. You found the lead animal. You mapped the route in your mind. And now all you have to do is get there. Then it starts raining. Not a light drizzle, but a heavy, soaking, wind-driven rain that does not stop. It lasts all day, then all night. The next morning comes, and it is still falling. Now you cannot hunt. The tracks are gone, washed away by mud and water. You cannot move safely across the open ground, because wet earth and bare feet on rocky terrain mean one bad step could twist your ankle. And out here, a twisted ankle could mean death. The river near your camp is rising. The fire, the one thing keeping you warm, keeping predators away, and keeping you alive, is beginning to fail. You are not bored. You are trapped. For most of human history, rain was not a minor inconvenience. It was a crisis. And what ancient humans did during that crisis may have been more important than what they did on clear days. Today, when it rains, you close the window, make some coffee, grab a blanket, and turn on Netflix. You settle into the couch, find the perfect position, and slowly drift into comfort. For you, rain is background noise. Feels calming. It makes you sleepy. You might not even finish the episode. But for a human being 50,000 years ago, that same rain, the exact same sound you fall asleep to, could kill you in several different ways before it even stopped. The first danger was cold. A wet human body loses heat up to 25 times faster than a dry one. Without clothing or waterproof shelter, a long rainstorm in temperatures below about 50 degrees Fahrenheit could push your body into hypothermia within hours. And much of the world our ancestors lived in became that cold at night, even parts of Africa during the wet season, especially at higher elevations. The second danger was flooding. Caves and rock shelters, the main places humans often lived, were usually found near hillsides or rivers. That meant heavy rain could bring flash floods. Archaeologists have found layers of flood sediment inside caves that were clearly occupied by humans, meaning water entered while people were living there. In some cases, those flood layers are so thick that the caves were never used again afterward. The third danger may have been the worst of all: predators. Rain drove animals into shelter too, and sometimes that shelter was the very same cave humans were using. In cave sites in South Africa, archaeologists have found human remains and large cat remains in the same layers. Some human skulls even show puncture marks that closely match leopard teeth. So rain did not just make life uncomfortable. It compressed the entire world. Humans, predators, and prey were all pushed into the same small dry spaces at the same time. And in the middle of all that, one job mattered more than anything else: keeping the fire alive. That was terrifying because before roughly 40,000 years ago, we are not completely sure how reliably humans could start fire from scratch. There is evidence of controlled fire use going back at least 400,000 years, at sites such as Kizum Cave in Israel, and possibly as far back as 1 million years at Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. But there is a big difference between controlling a fire that already exists and creating a new one from nothing. For most of human history, many people probably could not do the second one. So if your fire went out, you might not be able to relight it. You would have to carry fire from somewhere else. Some groups actually did this. They transported glowing embers wrapped in green leaves or packed inside certain woody fungi, such as tinder fungus, which could catch a spark and smolder for hours. It was basically a biological lighter. And we know this was not guesswork. When archaeologists found Otzi the Iceman, a 5,300-year-old man preserved in the Alps, he was carrying a complete fire-starting kit in his belt pouch. Tinder fungus, flint, iron pyrite for striking sparks, and extra plant tinder as backup.